Well, welcome, Power Partners, to our informational playground. This is Starstyle, Be the Star You Are. We're brought to the airwaves under the auspices of Be the Star You Are charity. I am your host, Cynthia Brian, and we are coming to you on the Voice America Network. We hope that you are having a wonderful week and getting ready for festivities for St. Patrick's Day, which is coming up. And don't forget, we always want you to live your dreams and to be the writer, producer, director, and star of your own life. The miracle moment for today, brought to you by Be the Star You Are charity, is from St. Francis de Sales. Half an hour's meditation each day is essential, except when you're busy. Then a full hour is needed. I love that one. I've always talked about how I do meditate for about 20 minutes, not quite a half an hour every day, but there are days when things are so stressful that I feel like you're right. I do need to do it longer. Well, our show today is going to be covering a few different topics. Of course, we're going to talk about St. Patrick's Day coming up. That's March 17th. It seems like every place around the world, whether you're Irish or not, we love to celebrate. But in segment one, talking about what are the highest costs of living in which states. And segment two, we go into the garden because my favorite time of year is pretty much around the corner. March is when the spring solstice happens. And so spring is coming, and I want to give you, as the goddess gardener, some tips for your garden. And in case you want to check out the charity Be the Star You Are, we have one nonprofit of the year, and we're a top nonprofit for 2025. Visit bethestarur.org. So, what state you live in probably is going to determine your everyday costs. And as we know, things seem to be getting more expensive and more expensive and more expensive. But every state has a different amount that you will spend on various things. Now, both Yahoo Finance and Marist Poll, they did a survey and they found 47% of Americans cite the cost of living as their biggest obstacle to saving money. And it is hard to save. I mean, we have that. I don't know if it's old fashioned. I think it was a good way to go is that for everything, every time you get a paycheck, you put some into savings, you give a little bit for donation, and then you put some to pay your bills. I mean, I've always done that, and I feel that it's been a helpful way to live. But these days, sometimes you get a paycheck and you may not even have enough to pay your bills because rising inflation is continuing to impact Americans across the United States. And the latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics found that the Consumer Price Index, it's called the CPI, increased 3% year over year in January. But some parts of the country are hit harder by raising costs than others. And where you live, what state you live in, is going to play a real key role in the price of everyday essentials, from eggs at the grocery store to what you're paying in rent. So, what are the states with the highest cost of living? There are five that are listed. It's no surprise I happen to live in one of them. It's California. California has the highest cost of living in the country. It's 12.6% higher than the national average. The primary driver of this is housing costs, and especially in the areas like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and of course in Silicon Valley. In California, the regional price parity, it's called RPP for housing rents, is 157.8. And what that means is that housing costs are 57.8% above the national average. So what I would spend on a house here in California, I could probably buy two houses in several other states. And when it comes to housing, it's very difficult to get insurance for homeowners insurance. In fact, I have spent the last 2 days attempting to find homeowners insurance for where we live because we are now considered a fire zone and it's number 4. So that, I guess that's considered a high number. It's really scary. Insurance costs have gone through the roof, but just getting insurance is so difficult. The next place that is really high cost of living is the District of Columbia. The nation's capital has the second highest cost of living. It's 10.8% higher than the national average. And again, that is due to exceptionally high housing costs and also utility prices. Now, in New Jersey, it is the third place that is the highest. That cost of living exceeds the national average by 8.9%. And of course, part of that is that proximity to New York City, which contributes to higher housing costs and higher cost of goods. And some of the goods in New Jersey are the highest in the country. The fourth one, probably it's no coincidence or it's not a surprise either, would be Hawaii, the Aloha state, the beautiful state of Hawaii. That cost of living is 8.6 higher than the national average, and that is due to the state's remote location. And that means that so much has to be imported, and that drives the prices up. Plus, there's limited land availability, so the housing prices are also very, very high. Then the state of Washington, I wouldn't have thought that would have been one of them, but according to the Marist poll, yes, it rounds out the list of the top 5 states with the highest cost of living, and it's at 8.6. It's pretty even. Hawaii and Washington are really even. So 8.6% higher than the national average. And like every place else, it's the high cost of living and how much houses cost. Houses in Washington cost 25% more than the national average. And that was kind of a surprise to me that it would be the highest. Now, the 5 states with the lowest cost of living, you probably already know which states they are. I mean, I guessed them kind of right off the bat. Arkansas is number 1. It holds the title of the state with the lowest cost of living, 13.5% lower than the national average, because housing costs are really low. It has some of the least expensive housing in the country. The only place that is a little bit lower would be Mississippi and West Virginia. But even so, personal expenditures in the state rose 1.9% year over year, which is pretty modest. Then Mississippi, the cost of living is 12.7% lower than the national average, and personal expenditures increased just over 1% year over year. Housing and utility remain the lowest in the country. South Dakota is also another state that has a very low cost of living at 11.9% below the national average. And like other states that are on the low cost list, South Dakota's affordable housing market is playing a major factor in maintaining its lower overall price levels. Oklahoma, the cost of living in Oklahoma is 11.7% below the national average. And addition to lower housing costs, Oklahoma benefits from relatively low prices on just about everything, and that contributes to an overall lower cost of living. The final one on the low cost is Louisiana. So you see a lot of those southern states really have low costs. It's 11.7% national average. It has very low housing costs, and it has some of the cheapest goods that you could buy in the country. I don't know what the quality is, but they're very inexpensive. Now, if you're wondering how you can reduce your cost of living, your state's cost of living obviously significantly impacts your ability to afford daily essentials. And it impacts your ability to save any money or even to raise your finances or to reach any financial goals. So if you live in a state like California with that higher cost of living, you might consider some of these strategies to reduce your expenses. If you can sign a longer lease, if you're renting, that might really help, because when a landlord has to spend time searching for a new tenant, they miss out on rental income. And plus, with each new tenant, there's a risk that they won't stick to their payments or that they might have done some destruction to the property and they have improvements to be made. So longer leases usually can save money. Standard leases tend to be about 12 months, but if you can sign a longer lease, that could entice the landlord to lower your monthly rate in exchange for a guaranteed rental income over a longer period of time. For my office, I always did 5-year leases, and that was able to give me a little bit, better. Now, refinancing a mortgage, if you have a mortgage and you're a homeowner, that might help you lower your costs. However, right now, costs are high for refinancing, but you could look around and if you have a 7% or something, you might want to look around to try to find a new mortgage for that property, but with better terms and a lower rate. And that can really lower your monthly payments and help you a lot. But interest rates are high right now. If you are in an urban area, you could rely more on public transportation. Some cities have really great public transportation, and you can use that instead of driving, which can save you on gas, insurance, parking costs. I mean, parking in San Francisco can be $75 a day, and that's not overnight. That's just for a work day. So that can really add up if you're trying to drive to San Francisco and park. Doesn't mean you have to give up your vehicle, although you might want to consider it if a large chunk of your budget goes towards car payments and expenses. And speaking of that, buying a used car is better than getting a new car. I talked about that in a segment a few months ago. However, because people are holding onto their cars longer, even used cars are more expensive now. You can also negotiate with service providers. You don't always have to, say in which company provides your electricity or your cable service. Now, electricity, sometimes you have no other choice, but maybe you can cut your cable or you can reduce some of the platforms that you might be paying on a monthly basis. So contact your internet, your cable, your phone, your utility companies. Ask about any promotional rates, loyalty discounts, or lower cost plans. And if there's another provider that's offering a better deal, you can ask your current provider if they match it or beat it. And some companies will offer discounts for long-term customers. And the bottom line is, doesn't hurt to ask. And if you're in a state like, Hawaii or Texas or Arizona or New Mexico, California, that has plenty of sun, you might look at solar. I know that our solar bills, they reduced by about 70% when we put solar paneling on our roof. It really made a difference. It paid itself off just within like 3 years. And that was an amazing. And so now you're kind of like, coasting. And then finally, if you live in such a high cost state, maybe the only way to reduce your cost is to move to a cheaper state. There are states that have no income tax, like Texas or Nevada. Maybe that helps you keep more of your earnings. However, before you make a move to another state, you really should visit and see how you like it. Do you like the people? Do you like the politics? Do you like the policies? Do you like the weather? And that there, even if there's no income tax, are there taxes on other things? Check everything, because I know so many people who have tried to move away from California and only to realize that they don't like where they moved to. They really liked it in California. The weather was great. They liked the amenities and the people and all the different things that California offers. And then they really can't afford to move back. So before you move away, check everything and maybe just, rent a place for a little while and see how it goes. Well, you're listening to Cynthia Brian. This is Starstyle, Be the Star You Are. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to head into the garden and we're going to spring ahead. So excited about spring. Stay with me. You're listening to Starstyle, Be the Star You Are. We're on the Voice America Network. I'm Cynthia Brian and I will be back as your goddess gardener. Stay with me. Well, we're at the garden gate and we are going to walk in because it is almost springtime and I have so much to share with you. You're listening to Cynthia Brian. I am the Goddess Gardener and this is Starstyle. Be the star you are, coming to you on the Voice America Network. Well, Stephen Graham said, as you sit on the hillside or lie prone under the trees of the forest or sprawl wet legged by a mountain stream, the great door that does not look like a door opens. I love it. Are you entranced by the green hills shimmering emerald as you drive through your neighborhoods, or do you enjoy listening to the creeks bubbling and gurgling throughout the community? Aren't the warmer days delicious? They sure are here in California. What a beautiful season commences in March. Spring is a time of new beginnings. It's burgeoning opportunities and gardens bursting in bloom. Daffodils are stretching their necks to the sun, and here we have them everywhere. They're throughout my hillside and my garden, but they're all along the walkways, the pathways, the driveways, the roadways, and the hillsides. Bradford pear trees have been blooming for over a month. Fruit tree buds are swollen this month and are especially handsome as the buds open to flower, with the leaves slowly unfurling. Growth is evident daily, and it's especially rewarding to cut a branch for indoor enjoyment. Try arranging a vase with a flowering peach, pear, plum, or cherry branch for a long lasting experiment in watching nature come alive. This is what I do, and I just love it. Flowering tulip magnolias are so spectacular this season, with various varieties coming to life at different times. And when the crocus and anemones pop up, you know that spring is nigh. Oxalis, which is a wood sorrel, is blooming for St. Patrick's Day. There are over 550 species in the Oxidaceae family, and it's a clover-like shamrock. It has these small trumpet-like flowers in shades of yellow, pink, white, and purple. The leaves open and close throughout the day, depending on the amount of sunlight. And because it spreads, many gardeners eradicate it as a noxious weed. Some species could be invasive, but now I have welcomed it into my landscape as a late winter ground cover. I just find the sunny yellow flowers cheerful. When the weather warms, it just dies back until the flowering following year, and I just, cut it down. So for me, I love shamrocks, and it just reminds me so much of being in Ireland and hunting for leprechauns, and all the little fairies. Monarch butterflies need our help. Hosts of different plants of milkweed are essential for the survival of monarch caterpillars. Nectar rich, fragrant flowers bring in the adults, and you got to be sure to plant flowers with bloom times from spring through fall that will attract a variety of pollinators. Some annuals that will attract these pollinators include Gaillardia, Cosmo, Zinnia, Marigold, Mexican sunflower, and Verbena, plus perennials of bee balm and echinacea and hollyhock and coreopsis, lamb's ear, passion flower vine, and black-eyed Susan. Those are all excellent choices. You want to eliminate insecticides, pesticides, and other toxic chemicals because if we have toxic chemicals, it doesn't only kill the bad insects, it will kill other pollinators. It can kill bees and birds and butterflies and bats. So you've got to keep away from it. So, with March heralding in the real spring, now is the time to check our brown thumbs at the garden gate and dive in with the green. And I have some guide for you for the month of March. So, one thing that there's one more weekend of it, and it's the Great Go Along, and it is a free online gardening session on weekends. And this next weekend will be the final one. So you can go to greatgrowalong.com. It's free, and it is about 4 or 5 hours of gardeners showing you. It's a video showing you how to do different things. It was great. And they even had one on chickens last week, which I loved so much. So watch the crocus and the anemones pop up as surprises. Don't forget to weed, weed, weed because there have been lots of rain. In fact, today is a rainy day. There's a lot of unwanted plants and they are sprouting, and it's best to pull them out by the root while the soil is soft. So I find that after it's rained, the soil is really kind of a little soggy. It's really easy to weed. So get down, get dirty, get those weeds out. You can improve the value of your home by adding trees to the landscape. It's estimated that landscaping with mature trees will add 10 to 20% to your home's property value. So, if you are thinking about selling, you might want to check that out and do it. Go au natural. You want to spend time outdoors in natural settings. Being in touch with nature is essential to the health of our minds, our bodies, and our spirit. You want to watch spring unfurl, maybe eat breakfast or lunch while sitting on your balcony, a patio, or porch. I actually do this every day that the weather is kind of sunny. I just sit out on a bench and watch the world go by while I eat a salad or a sandwich. Eliminate all pesticides from your gardening toolkit. They are detrimental to beneficial insects and also to humans. You can start seeds inside now for transplanting next month to your garden space, although some seeds can be planted directly right now. The seeds that can be planted directly would include peas and beans and spinach and beets, kale, also Swiss chard. So you could start those right now too. Increase your visual and nutritional interest by planning to plant vegetables and herbs in ornamental containers close to your kitchen door. The flavor won't be diminished because it's in a container, but the functionality will soar. And I do that every year. I'm going to plant more tomatoes in containers close to my kitchen this year too. Probably not until May though. You can start your spring gardening by improving the soil. Gardens often lack the microorganisms and the nutrients that are needed for a thriving crop. Now, if you have perennials such as daylilies or agapanthus, it's time to divide them, and then you can just plant them in other places that you want. If you want to reseed or plant a new lawn, this is a second best time to do it. Fall is the best, but spring is the second best. And then you can commence your weekly mowing for a sturdier growing. And for best results, don't use a leaf bag. Instead, allow the clippings to compost on the grass naturally. You could rake the lawn if clumping occurs. Or if there's too much clumping, maybe you can mow one time with a bag and the next week without a bag and alternate. Time to clean out fountains, ponds, bird baths, and other water features to welcome our flying feathered friends back home for the warmer weather. Display fallen camellias on a hedge, a ledge, or pathway for outside interest that are not pretty enough to float in a vase, but not rotten enough to toss in the compost bin. As camellias wilt, you want to dispose of them because there's something in them that can really get into the soil and it can cause disease in your camellias. It's also time to fertilize hungry lawns to strengthen the roots and to resist the cold, the heat, and high traffic when weather is wet. This feeding will help combat the stress of the drought, which probably will have drought. It sounds like, we have so much climate change. Who knows what's going to happen where, but check your area and see if it's time for you to fertilize. This is a good time to prune your fig trees and your grapevines. You can dry the branches and cuttings to use in your smoker or barbecue this summer. It'll add an interesting flavor to your grilled specialties. Again, plant milkweed, wildflowers, and nectar plants for the monarch butterflies. As caterpillars, monarchs feed exclusively on the leaves of the milkweed. Check your sprinklers and your irrigation system. Lawn sprinkler heads may get buried under new growth. Mine especially get buried in the lawn, so you have to turn them on and then you got to figure out where they are and you got to dig out those heads. On a clear day, take the time to make sure everything is working properly. And sit on a hillside under a tree or by a babbling brook to savor spring. And you can bring a bit of the Emerald Isle to your March 17th dinner with a pot of shamrocks, available now at your friendly garden center. Erin Gobra. Well, that's it for our gardening segment. I wish you happy gardening, happy growing, and happy spring. And you can check out my book, Growing with the Goddess Gardener, or Chicken Soup for the Gardener's Soul at cynthiabrian.com/book. So just cynthiabrian.com. If you click on the store, you'll get right to the place where you can order books and get lots of goodies. I just got a couple thank you notes in the mail from people who ordered books and received all the extras, and they were so shocked and surprised to get seeds and cards and bookmarks and stickers and all kinds of fun things that just make it more pleasurable to be reading a book. Well, you're listening to Cynthia Brian. This is Star Style. Be the star you are. We'll be back with a business sprite and then our final segment. Stay with me. Do you know how to orchestrate a meeting? Meetings cost money, yet they are necessary. So here are some pointers to keep meetings as productive as possible. Start on time, provide minutes from last meeting, at least 2 days before. Pass out a written agenda and then keep to the meeting points. Each person has the opportunity to speak without interruptions. Problems addressed must be accompanied by solutions. No cell phones, pagers, or other distractions allowed. No one dominates, everyone participates. Keep the forum upbeat and positive, and then we'll end on time. So don't take your valuable time for granted. Complete your projects to satisfaction by conducting a meaningful meeting. Remember, you're the star of your own performance. Turn your passions into profits. I'm Cynthia Brian with another business bite from Starstyle. For more information, visit cynthiabrian.com. That's Brian with an I.com. Well, we are back, and this is our Happy St. Patrick's Day segment. I absolutely love everything about Ireland. I've been there many, many times. I'm actually an honorary Irish woman. I got the keys to Limerick when I was speaking there and was meeting with the mayor and all that. It was really, really fun. But I have pen pals from Ireland, lots and lots of friends. I was taught by Irish nuns. So I have a big affinity for St. Patrick's Day, always wearing green. I actually was an Irish dancer as a child and traveled throughout California doing the Irish jig and other dances. So I still put on my outfits and I love it. So let's talk a little bit about the history of St. Patrick. We observe St. Patrick's Day, who's considered the patron saint of Ireland, on the death of Patrick. That holiday has evolved into a celebration of Irish culture. And all over the world, there are parades and special foods and music and dancing and drinking and a whole lot of green. And when it comes to drinking Guinness, which is like the country beer of Ireland, which they make green on St. Patrick's Day, I like it when I'm in Ireland, but I have never really liked it here. And when I was visiting the Guinness brewery, I asked, why does it taste so good here in Ireland? And why isn't it very good in America? And it's because it's fresh when they make it in Ireland. And the Irish drink so much of it is that it's constantly fresh. So you're never getting any stale beer. I thought it was very interesting. Anyway, March 17th is St. Patrick's Day, and it has been observed as a religious holiday in Ireland for over 1,000 years. That's a long time to celebrate. On St. Patrick's Day, it falls during the Christian season of Lent. Irish families would traditionally attend church in the morning, and then they'd celebrate in the afternoon. Now, there are Lenten prohibitions against consuming meat, but that was waived, and people would dance and drink and feast on the traditional meal of Irish bacon and cabbage. We call it corned beef and cabbage, but if you're in Ireland, it's really more of a ham or a bacon. Now, St. Patrick lived during the 5th century, and he was actually born in what was called Roman Britain. He was kidnapped and brought to Ireland as a slave at age 16. He then escaped and he returned to Ireland, supposedly then bringing Christianity. And among the plunder that was captured by a band of warriors that was dispatched by Ireland's King Niall of the 9 hostages, he was a 16-year-old boy and he was named Succat. Now, of course, again, he lived in the 5th century. So we don't, this has all been handed down. So how truthful everything is, we don't know for sure, but this is what history says. So he was brought to Ireland against his will, and this teenager would go on to become Ireland's patron saint, known as St. Patrick. Now, he was a foreigner who arrived in Ireland in the hold of a pagan king's slave ship. But it's so interesting that he would become synonymous with the island itself. Now, there are some established facts about his youth. There's only a few, though, but much of what is known comes from the saint himself. He wrote a very short autobiography called Confessio. And according to the traditional narrative, he was born into a well-to-do family around 386 AD, and he grew up along Great Britain's western coast, probably Wales, which was part of the Roman Empire at the time. And his father was a Christian deacon and a minor Roman official. And his grandfather was a priest. Now, I don't know how priests married in those days or any of that, but that's kind of interesting fact, or maybe factoid, we don't know. But the raid that tore him away from his family wasn't unusual in the early 5th century because according to Roman sources, the Irish had been raiding Britain regularly for a century before Patrick was captured in the early 400s, just as the Saxons had been raiding in the east of Britain. So one of the most horrifying features of the period is the wholesale enslavement of free men and free women. And in the slavery business, no tribe was more fierce or more feared than the Irish. And as Roman power waned, forays by Irish raiders grew more common. So, on a regular basis, they plundered animals and clothes, and they snatched children from their sleep in the middle of the night, and they abducted young men to herd sheep and cows and young women to serve them. So it could make sense that ripped from his home, Patrick was became a slave who herded sheep for a local chieftain on the slopes of Mount Slemish in the county of Antrim. It's in the north of Ireland. He was deprived of food and clothes, and so he lived in virtual isolation, and his only companion were his sheep flock and his newfound faith, which was Christianity. So, amid this whole desolation, his Christianity evidently blossomed. And it is said, or he wrote, that he prayed as many as 100 times a day and matched that total at night. So it sounds like all he did was pray. And he wrote in the Confessio that 6 years into his captivity, an angel appeared in a dream and told him, "You have fasted well." Well, obviously, he didn't have any food. So I guess that he was an enforced fast. "And very soon you'll return to your native country." And that in the dream, the angel told him that a ship was leaving Ireland, and he walked 200 miles across the peat bogs and forests of Ireland. He arrived at the port, probably Wexford, and he found a cargo ship that was bound for Europe. And after the captain refused him passage, he began to pray. And before he could finish, a sailor came along from the ship shouting, "Come quickly, the men are calling you." And after learning that captain changed his mind, Patrick sailed away from Ireland, believing that God's protection must have been responsible for his escape. Now, St. Patrick's biographer, a man named Freeman, says that although this escape was unusual, it probably did happen because it would have been a very harrowing and difficult journey. But there's a lot of stories of escaped slaves from elsewhere in the Roman world that made it to the European continent. And not all scholars believe it, there's a lot of doubts that have been raised about the legend of the saint's time in slavery, but the traditional story that Patrick was kidnapped from Britain, forced to work as a slave, and managed to escape and reclaim his status, that could be fiction. The probability that Patrick managed to cross from his alleged place of captivity in Western Ireland back to Britain undetected at a time when transportation was complicated, according to historians, is probably unlikely. So who knows what the real story is, but they do assert that Patrick deliberately fled to the island to avoid inheriting his father's job as a Roman tax collector. So, in other words, he went back to Ireland because he didn't want to become a Roman tax collector. Anyway, he also argued that rather than being an enslaved man, it was more likely that Patrick was actually a slave trader because he proclaimed himself a wealthy man at a time when Ireland lacked monetary economy, and slave trading was one of the few lucrative businesses. So who knows whether he was a slave or a slave trader? I mean, it's a big difference, obviously. But the traditional legend was instigated by Patrick himself in the text because he wanted to be remembered that way. So in Patrick's telling in the Confessio, he almost died after his escape from slavery. And after landing on the continents, the ship's crew found itself wandering for weeks in the wilderness. They didn't have any food, and they began to get mad at Patrick, and asking him, what's your God going to do for us? And again, Patrick prayed, and evidently in the middle of a prayer, there was a stampede of pigs. And that they were able to kill the pigs and eat them. And so Patrick had his first converts. And then he returned to his family in Great Britain. And then he heard another voice from Ireland calling out to him to come and walk among them again. Now, so supposedly this is what he did. He was consecrated as a bishop in 432 and given the name Patricius. And although many formerly enslaved people would have dreaded a return to their place of captivity, Patrick actually asked for an assignment as a missionary to Ireland. And when he returned to that island that was pagan, he tended to a different type of flock. And because he knew the customs and the language of Ireland, it facilitated him to convert and baptize Druid priests and chieftains and aristocrats, thousands before his death on March 17th, 461 AD. And of course, when you go to Ireland, there are no snakes, and the legend is that St. Patrick drove out all the snakes from Ireland. And he supposedly picked up the shamrock, which I talked about, that is a plant called oxalis, and it looks like a clover, but it has three, it's not a four-leaf clover, it's a three-leaf clover. And this is how he described Christianity with the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, the Holy Trinity. He said that the shamrock was like the Holy Trinity. So when he showed the people the shamrock, which grows all over Ireland, then it helped them to convert to Christianity. So that's kind of, who knows if it's legend, part history, part legend, but we still celebrate St. Patrick's Day on March 17th. So again, Erin go bra. Well, that is our show for today. Thank you for joining me here at Starstyle, Be the Star You Are. Remember, you can change your life and make your dreams come true. For more information about Starstyle Productions or to purchase any of my books, visit CynthiaBrian.com. And I do have stories about Ireland in my book, Be the Star You Are, 99 Gifts for Living, Loving, Laughing, and Learning to Make a Difference. So you can find out more about some of my travels and some of the Irish legends. To make a donation or to get involved with Be the Star You Are charity, visit bethestarur.org. My aim, as always, is to encourage, inspire, inform, amuse, and motivate. See beyond your physical being. Know you are already the star you dreamed of becoming. Cherish the past, dream of the future, and celebrate every moment of your life. And always read a book because it's like a garden in your pocket. And until we celebrate next week, remember that love always wins, kindness always prevails, and smiles will keep us happy. My name is Cynthia Brian for Starstyle. I thank you and encourage you to be your unapologetically authentic self. Be the star you are. Have a very, very happy St. Patrick's Day. Raise a glass, but don't drink too much, and do an Irish jig. Have fun. Erin go bra. Happy St. Patrick's